what's going on, guys? It's MobaDeadBreed here on behalf of MMOBomb.com. Who else would it be, of course? And welcome back to the Free to Play Podcast, episode 97. Today is February 2nd, and geez Louise, 97. We gotta start the countdown timer. 3 away from the big 100, and there's going to be a special guest host that's going to join us in. So I would definitely start telling your friends now to check out that episode as it comes out. Because there's going to be some happenings, there's going to be some stuff that happens in that episode. Really looking forward to it. Now, there's stuff happening in this episode, though, and with that stuff happening, one of the guys that's making it happen, Jason Winter. How are you doing, man?
This is what happens when I miss staff meetings, apparently. I didn't know we had a special guest coming for episode 100.
I've been keeping it kind of like under wraps, you know, like a newborn baby. You just kind of like wrapping it up, you know, and only showing it occasionally. Is that
our special guest? Are we having a newborn baby?
It gets, you know, I have to keep it wrapped up because it's going to get a cold or a flu, you know, before I actually unveil it to the world. It's new. But no, it's not a baby, although it is a big, cuddly thing.
Oh, my.
It's joining. Yeah. Yeah. All right, well, we'll see what happens just a few weeks away from that episode, guys. So tune in to that, episode 100. Tell your friends, gather an audience. Who knows? Maybe it will even be live. See, that's a new revelation. Maybe it's live.
Now you're making promises your butt isn't going to be able to keep.
Oh, we'll see. We'll see. I said it may be, but I do know there is indeed going to be something cute and cuddly coming to the show. I don't know. Okay, maybe you won't appreciate being called that, but who knows? I'm giving too much away. All right. So we've got actually a great episode here, a maybe not cute and cuddly episode, but certainly an informative episode. And Jason, me and you, we're flying tag team. You know, we're doing the wingman thing tonight. Just me and you, no third compatriot or amigo. What was the guy in Top Guns? What was Tom Cruise's right-hand man called?
You know, they were just talking about that the other night in a conversation I was listening to, and I don't remember now.
Well, you're my Biggs. You're my Biggs.
I'm Biggs. I'm Biggs. You're Luke. All right.
I'm Luke. You're Biggs.
Oh, wait, I get shot down. Can I be Wedge?
No, Biggs doesn't die though, does it? Oh, Wedge doesn't die.
Yeah,
Wedge just gets shot and just flies away. Okay, so yeah, you're not Biggs. You're Wedge. Okay. So we got our red 5, and I don't know what Wedge is, but yeah, let's go ahead and dive right into the trenches, if you will.
Good one.
Yeah, there we go. Yeah. So first off today, we've got a little bit of news surrounding EverQuest Landmark from SOE, of course, the sandbox building MMORPG that it actually just out of the blue went into alpha, which was pretty astonishing yet amazing at the same time because, hey, yeah, alpha, that's great, making progress. We actually are going to see the MMO release this year. And they really started early. I mean, it's only February 2nd, and we're starting in the alpha, so we're probably going to have a pretty long development cycle throughout 2014 for EverQuest Landmark. But some other interesting news is that they actually released or removed the NDA after like the first day. So it's in alpha, no NDA. Players can record video, can post impressions, can talk about it, can even live stream the game. And it really seems like people were enjoying their experiences thus far. And now I'm curious, Jason, have you actually managed to snag a peek at any of the live streams or video content that's come out within the last like day or so? Because this literally happened like 2 days ago.
Yeah, I knew you were going to ask that too, but no, I haven't. All I've done is look at some screenshots people have posted on Twitter. Been doing something else this weekend that I actually can't talk about. NDA. So yeah, I've been kind of busy with that, just been looking at Twitter. But yeah, I'm hearing a few people talk about it, and just generally overwhelmingly positive reactions as far as I can tell.
I think people were really astonished by it. Particularly, I was watching a lot of streams, and people were just like mining. Like all there was really in the game currently is mining. There's a little bit of crafting, being able to craft like different types of materials, different pickaxes. I think some equipables that give you like little stats or boosts to your maybe your crafting or your resource gathering. But predominantly it's just that, in digging holes in the ground. And people are like blown away by the ability to dig these holes because of how like accurate they were. I was watching a 10,000 person stream and the guy was just digging a hole. That's all he was doing. But 10,000 people were watching that and they were fascinated by it.
Yeah, that's the thing, all the shots, I expected to see screenshots of stuff people built or something like that. No, it's people like either posing with their characters or, yeah, digging holes.
Yeah. the very like I guess that's like a testament to how like you've done something right when the most basic of mechanic in your MMO is like enthralling.
They didn't have to do the rest of it. They don't have to have all the building stuff. Just make it the whole digging game.
I know, just make it the whole digging. Like, just don't make it like actually regenerate and have people just make all these tunnel systems and stuff.
But realistically, it is kind of an extension of the whole exploration aspect that people like in games like Minecraft. Obviously, you have kind of a digging aspect, or even more traditional games like Skyrim. You like to be able to explore, and here they just added another dimension to the exploring, and
yeah,
they're just loving doing that.
It's really interesting that you say that because traditionally when we harvested resources in other MMORPGs, we just go find a node and harvest it. Like that's what it was. It was a node based, and in this case, it's not node based. It's actually exploration based, which even in other sandbox MMOs that are out there right now, say for example EVE Online, you still go to a grid point on a system to mine. Like you still have to sort of like you can scan down areas to go and find resources, but that's again using sort of basically like a scanning mini game to do so. This is actual exploration where you're digging down in a place and you can uncover new things because you were just looking for one area and then hey, there's a new vein here. And I saw countless people just sort of like, oh, I also got this resource down here while I'm mining. I think tin was like one of the most common resources people were mining. Everybody was looking for tin. There's tons of tin. But
10. I thought you said 10. I was like, what kind? Were they looking for a number?
Yeah, the number 10. They're mining out the number 10s. Yeah. No, they're looking for 10. I mean, it had tin and copper, and there were some resources that required, of course, like more pickaxes. So you got to actually see some of the core gameplay, just from a normal player perspective, and it was kind of interesting to watch how everybody reacted to it. Overall, though, like you said, very positive. One thing that I'll mention that I think is worth talking about is the fact that John Smedley's actually stated that if you guys if someone purchases access to the alpha, because let's face it, alpha access is not cheap currently. It starts at $59.99. I mean that's ridiculously expensive. It's quite excessive, and I would never ever suggest purchasing an alpha at $59.99. Yet people do it. It's there. It's available. However, Smedley has said that if you don't like the game, even in an alpha state, no problem. You can just return it. You can actually get your money back. He's actually confirmed you can return the game, a digital game that's in alpha that you purchased a pre-order pack for. You can get your money back and just, hey, no hard feelings.
And they can do this too because it is technically a free-to-play game. All you're really getting out, you're getting a few little trinkets and some clothes and maybe that slightly better pickaxe, but if you just didn't think that you liked it that much and you don't want to pay that much right now, you can get into it later as a free-to-play game. And of course, you might wind up spending more than that overall. So it's not like a normal game that maybe if you had pre-access or pre-order or whatever, $60, you don't like some part of it, you give it back. You'd still have to make the decision later to pay $60 to get into it anyway. Or you can still get into it; it'll just be later.
Yeah, but I mean, this is something that we don't even. I mean, early access, for example, on Steam. Same concept essentially. You get into the game at some point in development. Sometimes it's very early on in development. Like EverQuest Landmark, don't get us wrong, it's very early in development. There's not a lot to actually do outside of some basic crafting and building essentially. There's only 2 biomes. There's no subterranean levels. There's no combat. All that stuff is hinted and promised at in the future, but currently that's not in the game. However, it doesn't matter. So we stated that if you don't like it, you don't like it. Return, no problem. No questions asked, essentially. And I wish that we would see more game developers do this. It's kind of funny that we would see a free-to-play game developer, do this first instead of like a buy-to-play developer.
And we always have the little notion that on some level, whenever a company does this, whether it's an alpha access or beta access, whether even a Kickstarter or something like that, we have this notion of once I give them my money, they're just gonna throw parties with hookers and booze and don't need to finish the game or whatever. So it's nice to know that obviously. I mean,
there's cocaine in there. There's cocaine in there.
Yeah, the cocaine. That's what I meant. I mean, obviously we're not like we thought they were going to do this anyway, but it's nice to know that there's definitely the assurance that they're still planning to work on the game and finish it and whatever.
Yeah, I mean, really, to me, it sort of like gives testament to, I think, SOE's overall change in attitude over the last few years versus how they were, say, in the mid-2000s. For those of you who don't really know SOE's history too much, I mean, SOE was one of the original sort of forward thinkers in development for some of the early MMOs. They created Planetside 1 and EverQuest, both of which were sort of unheard of at the time in terms of what they did with their respective genres. Planetside 2 being like way ahead of its time, where I think it came out like 1999 or something.
No, Planetside 2 was like early 2000s.
Yeah. I think it was like 2001
EverQuest was 99.
EverQuest was 99. Yeah,
and they didn't actually make that. The other guys made it, and SOE bought it. But
True. But they have a history sort of rooted in that, and I think during the mid 2000s, early 2000s, they sort of started getting away from that for a while. But it seems like they sort of are changing face. They're doing an about face, sort of steering their ship in a separate direction and focusing more towards next gen, or what you would consider next gen in an MMO sense, style of games. We had Planetside 2 came out in 2012. Now 2014, we've had like a 1-year hiatus in between. Still seeing great growth in the Planetside 2 area. Now we have EverQuest Landmark, and then after that EverQuest Next. And then after that, Smedley even sort of teased what kind of MMO they were going to be working on next. He did an AMA on Reddit, and he talked about there being something for SWG fans, Star Wars Galaxy fans, which, of course, SOE shut down and quote-unquote ruined for many players by doing a expansion that they didn't particularly enjoy because of what it did to the game. So it's sort of like their way of making it up. But it's kind of interesting, all these games they're doing are the kind of games, it seems, that players have been asking for, at least in the MMO space, I feel. They've been asking for more exploration, more sandbox style, more open world, larger player base in the case of Planetside 2 for shooters. So I'm just kind of curious, Jason, do you think really SOE gets it in terms of like what people are looking for in MMOs for the future? Do you think SOE sort of like has a line on what the next 5 years in MMOs is going to look like?
I think they were. I mean, you talk about some of the stuff. The NG for Star Wars Galaxies being a good example. I remember reading some controversy regarding a card in Legends of Norath, their online EverQuest-based trading card game. They could only get it by playing EverQuest, and that was before it was free to play. So people were ticked off about that. They're making us play this to play the other game, and I saw people on forums for that game being like, "Oh, it's a SOE's money grubbing, blah blah, SOBs, whatever. SOEs are SOBs or whatever." They've had as much bad PR as any company, like you said, during the middle part of the 90s especially, or the 2000s especially. And they've really turned a corner, I think. They've really sort of done a better job of figuring out what people want, what little bit of what they can get away with and what they can't. They are not as bad as they used to be. They still slip up occasionally a little bit here and there, but they are listening to their fans a lot better, I think. And like you said, are a little more forward thinking than some other companies out there. Obviously, they firmly committed to free to play. Smedley's more or less said that's how every game they make from now on is going to be free to play. So they are as hip, I guess you could say, as any MMO company is right now, with the way that they're looking to do business and the way that they're innovating. Not necessarily, I guess you could say Landmark certainly is innovative, and EverQuest Next as well in what they're doing, but even going outside the actual gameplay, just in terms of their business practices, like the refund sort of thing, and just how they're handling themselves and how they're presenting themselves as a company.
Yeah, you mentioned business practices. I think one of the things that SOE has really shown itself to be is reactive in recent years. They are very reactive to what the player base is vocal about. Their player base was vocal about the subscription changes. SOE reacted to that and made adjustments based on that. They were very reactive to things in Planetside 2. We've seen that through development. They halted development on further content to actually focus in Planetside 2 on fixing a lot of the optimization issues that players were vocalizing, and they did that. I think they nailed that one and hit it out of the park. So I think really John Smedley and SOE in general are showing that the company is lean and is agile enough to really make the changes when they matter and where they matter.
They are as active and good on social media as pretty much any company out there, any MMO company. They definitely interact with the fans throughout. Like I said, you mentioned Reddit and Twitter and Facebook and everything else.
Yeah, I think I remember reading a comment on Reddit about somebody was streaming EverQuest Landmark. This was before they announced the NDA was released. You know, they removed it. He was streaming it by breaching the NDA, and Smedley actually came in the stream, and instead of like berating him or anything and telling him to shut it off, he just casually asked the guy how he was enjoying it, was interacting with fans, not being a Debbie Downer at all. Just absolutely not being a Debbie Downer at all, which was incredible to me. And when they asked him why was there an NDA even to begin with for the alpha, I mean, he just mentioned that they wanted to make sure that the servers were stable, you know, and they didn't want the very, very first impression to be like this constant crash.
Sure.
And so I can totally understand that. I mean, come on, a day, you know. But it certainly makes sense for there not to be NDA on an alpha that you would pay for. It'd be one thing if the alpha was just randomly given out. But in an alpha you pay for, you typically expect, you know, to be able to see what you're getting and share with others what you're getting from that respect. Now, there was some sort of, well, depending on how you look at it, bad news regarding SOE last week. And that was in regards to the fact that they purged 4 of their MMOs. They're shutting down 4, which was, I mean, 4 at a time. That was pretty substantial. It was, I believe, Wizard. I almost said Wizard. Yeah, almost said Wizard 101. Yeah, there's Wizardry. And then they're also shutting down Vanguard, the Clone Wars MMO, and then what was the last one?
Free Realms.
Free Realms. That's right. And certainly, if you look at those MMOs, those are really MMOs that are like, again, were sort of the MMOs that SOE had during that 2005-ish period. You know, when they had the smorgasbord of different MMOs from different, you know, developers essentially. But even then, they supported them for so many years, and I think John said that Smedley said that Vanguard they supported for 7 years past when it was actually profitable. Mm-hmm. Which is pretty crazy. I mean, that's a long time to support a game that is not, you know, doing as hot as, you know, any other game. A lot of times developers drop games after just 6 months to 8 months when a game isn't doing well. You know?
I thought it had been out for 7 years, and he said that they had been supporting it past it was profitable, but it hadn't necessarily been unprofitable that whole 7. I'm not sure. I don't know.
Oh, sorry. I don't mean to
I don't know. I don't know that he said that it was unprofitable its whole run.
Oh yeah, the whole run. But he definitely said that they had been operating it for a while when it was profitable. Yes, clearly stating that they were doing it, you know, for the player. So. I don't. It's funny. Like the way that I was expecting more of like a backlash for that, but people really seem to be understanding of it. I think because SOE was showing what they were doing instead. You know, they're sort of cutting out the fat, going more for the lean, going more for games that players would actually see a lot of growth in terms of like new features and forward-thinking things, and certainly MMOs that you can grow with, not MMOs that sort of have just a singular pathway that you progress through. And I think one person in the comments on our article mentioned that all those games, you know, you can just sort of progress to a certain point and then you have to pay something.
Sure.
Whereas a lot of SOE's newer games, Dragon's Prophet withstanding, they didn't make that, are more the other way, where you can just play and there's no real inhibitor to how you play. I think that's really prevalent in Planetside, where you never feel like you have to pay, you never feel like, you know, the level system makes you need to have to level up. That's all just, you know, that's all just outside of the full game experience of enjoying, you know, sure. Planetside too. So yeah, kudos for you, SOE. Keep up the good work, and who knows, maybe we'll have some EverQuest Landmark. I'm gonna have to keep getting that right. EverQuest Landmark alpha coverage coming soon, probably in the next week.
It should be noted too that Smedley tweeted separately that nobody was being laid off. That all the people working on those games are going to be reassigned.
I mean, come on. Like, do I need to, like, sing more praises for SOE right now? Like, they're doing real well. They're doing real. Let's hope that they can continue to do that. And certainly SOE is the MMO developer that we need in this time. In a time when MMOs
may not be the MMO developer we deserve.
No, but
it is the one we need. I don't remember how that goes.
It's something similar to that. We're not movie buffs. Come on. Whatever. So moving a little bit along, we actually have some further discussion on DeadBreed, that quote-unquote hardcore MMOBA made by some people who may or may not have made Just Cause, the original one. No, they did make it. We sent out some questions to Stefan Ungvist or Ungvist.
Probably, it could just be Lundqvist.
I have it actually. I looked it up online, and the correct pronunciation is
Okay.
Ungvist or Ungvist.
All right,
Yeah.
I knew some Lundqvists in high school, which was, you know, the more Americanized version. But all right,
I said, but I tried to do as much research.
Let's just call him Stefan. All right.
Stefan. Yeah, that's what Urkel turns into. You know, on was it Family Matters?
Family Matters.
Yeah, Stefan. I'm dating myself. I grew up with that show. All right, so yeah, Stefan here. He actually sent back some answers for questions that we had asked in regards to DeadBreed because there wasn't a lot of information available currently, and we got a lot of good responses. So I thought we'd sort of talk a little bit about what DeadBreed is trying to be. A lot of people said, "Oh, it's just another generic MOBA." I heard a lot of people tossing that around. When in fact, there's actually some pretty interesting mechanics that are supposedly going to be added into DeadBreed. So, first of all, I asked them a little bit about who they are, who these developers are, and they say they're actually not a development studio. They're not focusing on being a development studio, but they have instead just grouped together and decided to focus purely on making a great game rather than building a quote-unquote studio, which I think is pretty interesting. We don't see that very often. We do see sometimes collaborations, but those are usually on much smaller projects, not necessarily a game that's, you know, trying to compete with large companies like Valve and Riot in terms of, you know, competing in that space. Maybe not necessarily competing for like the esports scene or something like that. I'm curious, Jason, what do you actually think about that as a business practice? The notion of you don't need a studio to make something like a MOBA and support it. Well, is that true? I mean, I guess with a studio you sort of gain some structure, some ability to throw around a name and, you know, have brand recognition. But do you see, you know, the benefit of not going in even with a small studio?
I mean, it depends on the people involved and how well they can communicate and keep themselves on the same page. I mean, like you said, you do hope that if they were just a studio, you know, kind of gathered all together in a place or something like that, then they can be more central, more rigorous in their methodologies and so on. I mean, I've worked for companies that have, I guess, I've had offices all over the place, and it can be a bit of a cluster sometimes, trying to get everybody communicating on the same page, whatever. We don't know exactly what their structure is and how their people are communicating with each other, but let's see. But yeah, I mean, it's sort of thing that sounds good now, and you hope that they can maintain that into the future and not run into those just kind of little nitpicky issues that you run into when you don't have everybody really together and completely on the same page at all times.
Exactly. Yeah, it sort of makes me wonder whether or not like they're actually in the same area. Like they could be collaborating on it from other, you know, zones of the world. You know, we do live in a global market now, and certainly I've seen games come together where people have worked across the, you know, the world, and it does make it harder to make a studio.
It is another step you have to take, though. I mean, you just have to be that much better to be able to handle it.
True. It is true. So besides that, we actually went into a little bit about, of course, the game, how the game played, and I got to find out a little bit more information. We talked a little bit last time about the Sentinels. We didn't really understand the Sentinels. They talked about how winning a game or playing a game would you know, influence Sentinels, and apparently these are godlike creatures that used to be in the cosmos but were sent down to hell, and now they sort of preside over these half-breeds, these dead breeds, and these, I guess, full breeds or whatever they called them, that are these creatures just fighting over in these battlegrounds of types. And as a player, how that affects you is you will go and you will pledge your zeal to one of these particular gods-like creatures, and by doing these matches, you'll increase their power, and therefore increase their abilities and their capabilities as a in-game boss, which ties into what happens at the end of matches. Apparently, according to the developers, at the end of a match, the enemy team will fight one of the sort of sentinels that you guys have chosen, and depending on how much you've actually leveled it up per se, the creature will be harder to fight for the enemy and perhaps reward you with more spoils if the enemy has more difficulty in tackling it. So there is a multiple sort of like tiered progression system available in DeadBreed. And Stefan said that he came from a past of designing and working on pen and paper RPGs, and he really wanted to incorporate more of a progression sense into MOBAs, which is sort of interesting. MOBAs originally were supposed to take an MMO formula and then condense the progression into just a match. But now we're seemingly going back to like an MMO formula where we have like a bunch of extra progression outside of the progression that happens within the match itself.
Yeah,
now, go ahead.
I was just going to say, yeah, just reading over that and all the other stuff in your interview, it does sound like it's really very RPG-like, MMORPG-like, or just even I guess MMO. I mean, it's interesting, and it adds a lot of complexity to it. And they talk about, this is very hardcore, and it definitely is, because there's a lot more to do than just your standard MOBA 5-on-5, or in this case 3-on-3 lanes and towers and so on. They're adding so much stuff to it that it will increase the complexity. It will make it something you really have to get into a lot more. Might affect how big of an audience it can get if it's not to say that it's not if it's not done well, but more to say that with that much stuff you're putting in, that's just that much more you have to balance and make sure you get it all done right. You hope that they can pull it off, and it's not going to be too ambitious.
Yeah, I mean, especially for the sense that they're not a big studio, they're just people working together. We hope that they could be able to pull it off. They mentioned that, I think one of the biggest interesting things during the interview that they mentioned is they elaborated more on the swapping out of like items, going from range to melee, melee to range. And this is something that really took me by surprise. You can actually do that in the match. So previously I thought you would only do that outside of the match, something that you would just equip before you actually got into the game, But apparently there is a shop, like you would think about a shop in any other MOBA, where you purchase items, but these items are more, actually translated onto your character and change how your character not only looks, but also how they play. So it gives an example of equipping them with like a shield and one-handed sword, and that will change their animations to be, a melee range hero, and it will actually change how they fight as well. So by actually putting on these different items and weapons in the game, you're not simply, powering yourself up. You're actually changing the way that you play that match as that character. Separate from that, there is the actual ability customization itself, which they didn't get into too much in the interview, but they did mention that they will be able to sort of customize and tailor your abilities somewhat to be separate from just simply the style of combatant that you are in just a melee or range. So I think that adds a huge level of complexity to the game, because can you imagine in any MOBA, a hero that normally is a range hero suddenly becomes a tanky melee hero midway through the game, and that completely changes the dynamic of how do you fight against that hero.
I guess it could, but I just wonder how much you'll want to do that during a match. I mean, if you go in planning to be, a melee tank, or a range person or something, are you really going to feel like you have a need to change that during the match? And are you going to be effective at it, having to make that switch? It's just, it feels to me, it's sort of like playing, like if you're playing a typical Battleground or a PvP match in an MMO, are you going to change your DPS character to suddenly be a tank in the middle of the match? Probably not. You might respec and like go into the next match as a tank, but it doesn't seem like the sort of thing you necessarily do during a match.
Well,
although being only 3 people per side, maybe it would be a little more important than this.
Yeah, and that's one thing they mentioned. They mentioned that because it's 3v3, there's a lot more importance on the choices that you make in the game. They wanted it to be a lot faster pace. I asked them if it was more focused on, if there was farming involved or if it was more focused on hero kills. They said there is farming. That is part of the actual match itself. But because it's 3v3, they also wanted it to be a little bit more fast paced, so they said kills will come a lot quicker. So I would assume that while farming is important to do, kills are going to overall be like the main sort of aggression. There's going to be a lot of aggression between players, and they want it to be more fast-paced. I think they only said like 20-minute rounds. So you've got a lot more to do in a lot less time, essentially. A lot more kills. They mentioned that there's these mini-adventures, these quests and dungeons to do, which I think is something really noteworthy to talk about. Now, the mini-adventure dungeons really just kind of sound like instance or camps of monsters. They sort of liken them to camps of monsters you would find in jungles and any other MOBA. But they say there's only one way into these and one way out of these. So with a typical jungle, you have multiple juke lanes. But with these dungeons, it sort of creates this really risk versus reward. Okay, you can go in there and you maybe get like a lot of gold. You know, you have some objectives to complete in these dungeons. Yes, some of these dungeons have objectives, but the enemy team could totally corner you inside of these and prevent you from escaping, and it could result in a pretty easy kill for them. So I'm sort of seeing a lot more objective-based gameplay in a lot of MOBAs now. I mean, even Heroes of the Storm, Blizzard's MOBA, has a lot more objective-based gameplay. There are towers, there's pushing, but then there's these side objectives where you collect these resources, or you know, you go and do a quest for someone. In DeadBreed, for instance, there's a quest where you have to go see some kind of wraith, and depending on what type of DeadBreed you are you a half-breed, DeadBreed, or something else, the wraith may attack you, or it may have you do something completely different. So it's even dependent on what type of hero you bring into the game. So that creates all types of layers of complexity, because suddenly, if you're like, okay, I know I'm going to be on this map, and I know that these are the quests that happen on these maps, I need to pick this type of hero because it provides the sort of best result for quest outcomes given our strategy, you know? So it just adds a lot of different strategy elements, or at least the potential in my opinion. Now, Jason, I wanted to ask you, it seems like new MOBAs are really starting to try to add more PvE content to the PvP of a MOBA. And again, I know you've always been a huge anti-advocate of MOBAs, just because you've never...
I hate them. Hate them all.
You hate them all. Well, at least that's a different stance in most people, where they just like one and hate everything else. You just hate everything.
I'm an equal opportunity hater. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah. But, yeah, go ahead.
Well, go ahead and ask me your question. So
I guess that's important.
Yeah.
I was just basically going to ask, like, does the addition of new sort of like dynamic questing and these dungeons and sort of these different sort of objectives, other than just simply killing the enemy outright, do those types of things interest you in the MOBA? Would that draw you more into a MOBA? Do you find that those are what a MOBA would need to make it, you know, break it up from killing other enemy champions and farming minions? Because that's sort of a lot of how the current MOBAs play. You know, it's a lot of those two mechanics, those two dynamics.
Maybe a little bit, but on the other hand, I also tend to think that, you know, my issue with the MOBA is more along the lines of, in a lot of cases, the complexity issue, which I know people are going to say, you know, oh, League of Legends, that's for noobs, it's really simple. But still, you got to like know exactly how to play your character and have all the experience and be level 30 and have all sorts of runes and know the exact build items and whatever. And that at least for me is sort of what turns me off a little bit. So something like this that just adds more layers of complexity. I don't know exactly how complex the gameplay is or whatever, but in terms of just stuff we're talking about with the dungeons, the different builds and so on, that sort of thing that definitely is going to appeal to some people, probably not as much to me.
I just think it's interesting that MOBAs originally started out as like I said before, just really sort of simplistic MMOs. Like it was like an MMO PvP in a nutshell. And they've sort of re-evolved into this PvE, PvP thing where people are like, okay, I'm sort of tired of just having the generic lanes and these minions. Let's add other objectives, you know, let's add other types of gameplay. And for me as a MOBA player, I welcome that because I like to have, you know, I think that a MOBA as a genre isn't a genre that doesn't need innovation. You know, like FPS need innovations, just like MMOs need innovations. There's no reason MOBAs can't be innovative as well. They don't have to fit a certain, you know, criterion, and they shouldn't. But in this case, it's sort of like a mix of familiarity. You know, it's not like Smite where it's like third person behind the camera. You've still got sort of a more familiar camera angle. But then you've got all these other sort of different elements that distract you from the fact that at its core, it is about, you know, killing minions and killing the players. It's sort of, you know, that's kind of like an FPS. Yeah, at its core, an FPS is about shooting the other person. You know, it's about killing that other person. But it's what you add to it that adds to the gameplay and makes it more interesting and unique. Yeah, sometimes it makes it, you know, more in depth. But other times it could add a lot of interesting sort of gameplay mechanics. And so I'm gonna still hold, you know, of course I'm gonna hold judgment. I haven't played the game, But I definitely think from what they've told us, they seem to be heading in the right direction for MOBAs in my case.
Yeah,
And
I agree with you. I think that you do have to add something else. I mean, you have to add something beyond the formula. Otherwise, you're just competing with League of Legends and Dota 2, and you're
exactly.
frankly, you're just not going to compete with those.
Exactly.
Whoever
I mean,
you are.
there's only so many ways you can make a jungle or make a way to farm.
Yeah.
It's about what you do in between the farming, the jungling, and the killing of the enemies. It's that extra sort of time. What you do, what can you fill that time with? So I'm really interested to see how they end up doing the questing. They did mention, really quickly back to the questing, they did mention that like if you got killed by someone, they have dynamic quests where, for example, if you got killed by someone, you may get a announced dynamic quest where if you kill the enemy, that same person that killed you within like 2 minutes, you get an additional bounty and extra reward. So that creates these incentives for doing things differently than just returning to what you were doing previously. And these are global. These are announced to both teams. So both teams can work on these objectives and counter work on those objectives to try to prevent, different teams from completing different quests.
That I think is a neat touch because it then just adds more to a random factor to the game. Because that's the thing about a lot of MOBAs. It's like, well, clearly this guy's going to go mid, and these people are going to fight over here, and you have the same strategy more or less every game. This applies a little more of a random factor to it.
It provides an incentive for doing something other than a meta-specific action.
Yes.
Like being the support or being the mid laner, like you said, or being the jungler.
Mm-hmm.
They did say that they have plans to add more maps in the future, and even mentioned the possibility of a 3-on-3-on-3, so 3 different teams of 3 game mode, which has been asked for a ton. I know a ton in League of Legends. Like,
sure.
So many people have wanted that. So maybe 3v3v3. That's actually still less people than a standard MOBA game of 5v5. So that could work.
Yeah.
So yeah, I would definitely go ahead, guys, and check out that interview if you haven't already. It's got a lot of great information in there. And if you're interested in MOBAs, DeadBreed may be worth checking out. Hopefully we'll have some beta keys for you guys to check it out yourself soon. All right. Now, speaking a little bit of the dead, or the undead, or the night stalkers, if you will. We've got a little bit of a discussion between me and you, Jason, regarding Nosgoth. Now, that's, of course, based on the Legacy of Kain franchise. And Nosgoth is sort of like a... what is it called where 2 teams, they're both completely separately different or play different?
Unequal... asymmetric.
Asymmetric, that's right. Asymmetric. So we played a little bit of this. Nosgoth, of course, is Square Enix in combination with the developers over at... and I had up their name, and then I lost their name. Square Enix in combination... Well, they're working with someone else. I'll have to pull it up here. But yeah, we got a chance. It's in alpha right now. And me and you, we got to play it a little bit.
I was terrible.
Yeah, it takes time. It takes time. I'm not gonna like dog you. Sorry, the studio is called Psyonix. Psyonix is the studio, and I wanted to talk to you about it because we did a little bit of a preview of it. There was an article preview. Can't do a video preview yet, and I wanted to talk about what we actually were impressed and not impressed by it. So first things first, it is currently a few maps. And it is a total of, what, 4 or 5? I think it's 4v4?
Yes, 4v4.
Yeah, 4v4 is the current format. One team being vampires, one team being humans. And your goal currently in the game is just to kill the other players. That's the current goal in the current game mode available. So gameplay-wise, the objectives are pretty simplistic. And I think that's one thing you talked about, Jason, in your article that you wish they would elaborate on.
Yeah, I hope someday they do add more game nodes, capture the flag or control points, something like that, just to give you a reason to spread out and do something more than just to kill each other. Obviously, it's alpha right now, so just want to make sure the basic gameplay works, but that is something they could definitely look towards doing in the future.
The way the game works is every player selects a class. One side spawns as vampires, one side spawns as humans. You select the class, and then you go about, trying to hunt down the others and kill them. And one thing I found is that the humans, they have access to things like the equivalent of a grenade launcher, a semi-automatic, or a pretty automatic, it's basically like a machine gun but with crossbows. Mm-hmm. And then there was like a longbow that you can shoot pretty far. So pretty standard classes from the humans, although each human has, I think, 2 unique abilities, and the same goes for the vampires. But it has a very sort of Left 4 Dead feeling to me, but faster, a lot faster.
And that's the part that kind of kills me because
Really?
I do not have the reaction time. Like I mentioned it in my article. It's like I'm the kind of guy who can't play a scout in Team Fortress 2, and will generally get beaten to death by a scout if he's jumping all around me. I don't have the ability to just to follow that quickly. So that's where it's not bad. I mean, obviously a lot of people do have that. I thought it played all right, but it's something that makes it. If you're the kind of person who gets easy motion sickness or can't handle really fast moving stuff, you're gonna have a bit of a hard time.
I actually thought that the movement was one of the better aspects of the game in its current state. It was very fluid. There was a lot of, you could dash around, you could roll out of the way of people, which is a very important part of gameplay, I would have to say. Rolling saves your life so much. It's very important. And then also as a vampire, you can scale walls, and if you're a particular type of vampire, you can actually fly around the map. I believe it's the Sentinel that can fly around the map. And so there's 3 classes for each, and the classes can be customized with different weapons and different abilities. And really what I found, at least in the current state of the game, is that vampires just seem to be like way stronger than humans. Like if you've got a really competent group of vampires, you can just mop the floor with humans.
Yeah, I mean, it seemed fairly even to me. Again, I didn't see big scores going one way or the other. Again, might have been just because my team always lost because I was crappy. But yeah, I mean, they did a pretty good job because that was one of the things we were worried about. Being asymmetric gameplay, where like one side's all melee, one side's all ranged. You got to think one's going to dominate the other. And again, just in my experience, I didn't really think so. Even if it is, that sort of thing they can, they're an alpha, obviously they can mess with that, and just tweaking the numbers should be enough to do it. I don't think it's that far off. Even if you do think it's a little off, I don't think it's critically terrible. I think it's good.
I would say that it's slightly favors vampires currently. Vampires are just so fast. They are so fast in the game. They're much faster than humans, and they can close. They have so many gap closers.
Well, they have to. Obviously.
Yeah, they have to because they're melee, of course. But it seems like when they really close the gap and they get in there, if all the vampires are in there at the same time with all of their abilities, they seem to just be able to quickly crush any resistance of humans. Now, if one vampire goes in alone, then yeah, I definitely agree with you. The humans have sort of the upper hand. But it kind of seemed like currently in this current state, it was whoever could. It was all about surviving as humans when you're as a human, surviving, trying to get what kills you could, and not trying to fall too far behind, and then ramping up and doing as much kills as you could when you're in your vampire. Because it flip-flops back and forth. One round you're a human, and then one round you're vampire, and then it adds up the score between the two of those and compares, and then whichever team is victorious, in the score, that's who wins. I think it's actually going to be pretty fun, honestly. I think Nosgoth is actually going to be one of those PvP games that stick around for at least a little while. And it's not because of the Legacy of Kain, background or pedigree that it's coming from. I mean, let's be honest. It really, if you didn't know it was related to Legacy of Kain, you couldn't tell. There's no.
I've never played the Legacy of Kain series. So.
I haven't either. Like neither of us have actually played the series. Don't get onto us. Those aren't MMOs. We don't have to be able to actually play everything. Come on.
Although actually, just a couple days ago, a friend, beat me on Steam and saying that he was a Legacy of Kain fan and he played Nosgoth and he loves it. So.
Oh well, there you go. So I definitely think that you should not hold it against the game that it's using that franchise. I don't think it makes it less of a game.
Yeah,
from a gameplay
there aren't characters in there that you have to know or you're going to be totally lost or anything.
Exactly. Like I do hope that they add some narrative. I would feel like it would be a waste for them to tie it to Legacy of Kain and not do something narrative driven in the game. If you wanted to compare it again to Left 4 Dead, Left 4 Dead had a narrative because you progressed the level, and the hunters and the zombies would always be the infected. Would always be hunting them as they progress. There is no such thing currently, again, because it's alpha. There's no objective modes. It's merely just everybody in a map fighting against each other. So I think that would be an opportunity for them to add something like that. If they could incorporate some style of like objectives where okay, the humans are trying to get somewhere and protect a shrine or something like that, or try to be extracted from an area of infested. I don't know.
Sure.
But yeah, that's certainly something they can do. But I would definitely say, at just a glance, it's just a vampire versus human game. You know, there's nothing really specific to Legacy of Kain about it. But it's a very, even in alpha state, it's very fun. You know, vampire versus human. I mean, you can drag people around as a vampire and then rip their throats out and eat them. And drink their blood. I mean, that's pretty awesome. The first time I realized you could just pick someone up by their leg and just like run around with them. Did you do that?
I was terrible with the flying vampire, trying to grab people and swoop down and grab people and take them around. It was always effective against me though. For some reason, it's like, well, those SOBs always got me.
Yeah, they did have a lot of abilities that reminded me of like the abilities in Left 4 Dead, like the what was it? The hunter? No, sorry, the reaver could pounce on humans, just like the hunter in Left 4 Dead. So there was a lot of similarities in some respects. Again, no ranged vampire classes, but it was fun. I found it to be fun. There was quite a lot of players, and
even despite my suckiness, I thought it was a pretty good game.
Yeah. Now, talking a little bit about the cash shop, they have a sort of permanent / rent system applied, which it seemed okay. It seemed like if you wanted to buy something in the shop in the current alpha state, it was about 5 times as expensive as renting it. Which, I mean, it did seem a little bit slow, at least in the alpha. I mean, again, there was not as many rounds being played continuously, but it did seem like currency was a little bit slow in accruing. So that
hopefully they'll have like bonuses or achievements that you can get to help you earn a little bit more, at least early on.
Yeah, I would like to see something kind of like games
like Hearthstone.
Hearthstone, or even War Thunder does. For example, in War Thunder, if you get a certain amount of assists, or you get a certain amount of kills, or you do certain things in the match, like drop down on enemies, do 100 falling damage or something like that. And that gives you a sort of an extra bonus for being like an extraordinary player on your team. I think that would be a nice way to provide incentives to players to play certain ways, or to maybe be a not just a lone wolf player, but a team player, because certainly Nosgoth feels like a team-based game. It does not feel like a lone wolf style of gameplay mechanic in terms of how it plays. Yeah, so there's actually, I have to say, quite a lot of games in 2014 to look forward to. Just out of the gate, I would not expect this many games. I mean, 2013 seemed to have sort of a lull with that, but we're back on track to have certainly quite a selection of interesting titles to check out, and ones that we haven't necessarily seen in free to play yet. So I'm really excited for Nosgoth, excited for DeadBreed, and just excited for EverQuest in general. Everything just looking it's shaping up to be quite an amazing year, Jason. I'm really happy about how this year's coming up for free to play.
Yes,
we got to look to see how everything else turns out, though. All right. Well, on a simply simple side note, speaking of games shaping up very well, this game did not shape up very well. But I did want to mention it quickly, and that was that Firefall had $23 million of extra funding added to it. Which, I mean, I was debating adding this in because a lot of people were like, oh, more Firefall news, But 23 million? What? Who?
I just gotta think that hopefully they've turned the corner under their new management, that they've proven that they're more capable and more ready than they were apparently under Mark Kern, and that's what the difference is. That they've shown enough now to somebody. You would think that after all the crap that went down, and as long as it's been, how long it's taken for them to come up with finish the game, that nobody will want to have anything to do with it. Yet obviously they must have done something now to convince somebody that it's worth that much more.
What I'm thinking, it got this was an agreement with Shanghai Oriental Pearl Culture Development Company, which, holy crap, it's a long name. Shanghai Oriental Pearl Culture Development Company, otherwise known as SOAP. It doesn't really make a good acronym.
Stefan. We'll just call it Stefan.
Let's just call it Stefan. Yeah, 23 million. If anything, what I think that would tell me, I mean, because we've actually seen some gameplay in trailers that we've never seen in game in terms of like locations and creatures. I kind of wonder if there's like a lot that's not being shown that's completed that they just haven't done well of implementing into the game. Because for 23 million to drop that, I mean, there hasn't been that much for the players to see developed over the last year in terms of expanding the area that you're playing in the game in Copacabana. They know they just recently added a few new regions with a few new sort of barren areas that are not Copacabana, which was like everybody went insane for a few weeks back. But there must be, yeah, like you were saying, that they must really have some type of new game plan that is at least promising internally. And hopefully this new round of funding can actually, as the current standing CEO James McCauley said, he said that this additional round of funding will offer us the means to execute on our plan for successfully launching Firefall in 2014. This is the year Firefall takes flight. The entire Red 5 tribe is focused on creating top quality content that will take Firefall to the next level, and we are excited for this next stage of development. Well,
good for them.
Good for them. You've been saying this for how many years now? 3? So continue saying it. I'll just wait.
Yeah.
We'll see how it goes. So yeah, there's a little bit of just extra tiny tidbit news for you guys to check out. No news yet as of what they're doing with that 23 million.
Not buy another bus. Actually.
Yeah, not buy another West Coast Customs bus, which I would suggest. I'm going to put it in the comments, but there's a really, really interesting post right up on Reddit from a employee that's been confirmed as an employee of Red 5, who actually went into sort of the politics of what happened internally that led to Mark Kern being removed as CEO and just sort of Firefall's current state. And I'll go ahead and put that in the comments. I would definitely suggest reading that if you're interested to see how Firefall and Red 5 sort of ended up where they are, according to this particular developer. But all right, why don't we go ahead then and just move right along to our DeBombs and A-bombs. Now, me and you, Jason, it's just intimate. You know, it's just us tonight. You can just tell me everything that's plaguing you, and I'll tell you everything that's I think is awesome, and we'll just share stories and drink hot cocoa by the fire, and and see where the night takes us.
I'm feeling uncomfortable now.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Jeez. Oh man.
Oh my God. I came back from Europe this week, and I'm just feeling a little bit of European love for my fellow compatriots. What's wrong with that? All right.
This is what happens. This is what happens when he's away from his wife for this long.
Yeah, I know, right? I start getting attached to other just randomly. It's like, oh, a moving body. Ah, there you go. Hug me. Yeah, I'm going to give a DeBomb to the mod/dev team behind Totem Arts, or the mod dev team called Totem Arts, rather. Those guys, and I wouldn't even call them a mod team because of what they've done, but they are technically a mod team. They've created what's called Renegade X, which is basically an homage/successor to the original Renegade, which, if for those of you who don't know, was sort of an ill-fated third-person shooter based in the Command & Conquer universe set. That was released around, I think, 2002 or 2007. Yeah, I think 2007, if I'm remembering correctly. Anyways, they just released some brand new gameplay footage of Renegade X, which is a spiritual successor actually sanctioned by EA. Incredible. I cannot believe EA said yes to this. But they've been working on it for 7 years, apparently, and it shows. It really shows. It's a team-oriented TPS, third-person shooter/FPS. You can switch between the modes. It's objective-based in its gameplay. It features vehicles, nuclear strikes, ion cannons, resource management, I think 30 weapons, and it's all completely free. All of it. You're completely free to play, and no pay-to-play, and no buy-to-win, or pay to win, none of that aspects at all. It's just going to be able to be downloaded and played, and it looked really spectacular, Jason. From the trailers, it looked solid in its gameplay, and I'm really looking forward to it. It's scheduled to launch in February, I believe February 25th. So I just had to go ahead and give a DeBomb to Totem Arts for really sticking to it. I mean, 7 years to make a game that you're not going to actually make any money off of. That's There's a developer.
So you say totally free? You mean like totally free?
I mean
it's
totally
not a cash
free.
shop or anything?
No cash shop.
Oh
nothing.
Wow. Okay.
Nothing.
That's crazy.
Completely free. And if you look at the gameplay, it doesn't even look that bad. It looks like a game I would purchase. Like it looks like a $15 to $20 game I would totally purchase on Steam, and it's completely free. And so I really have to head. That's why I said Totem Arts. I can't just say that they're a mod team, even though they label themselves as a mod team, because they've really gone and developed a full-blown, shooter that has a lot of cool mechanics and is definitely a step above what a lot of development companies put out today. So kudos to you guys. I am definitely looking forward to Renegade X, and we're definitely going to have some gameplay of that here on MMOBomb. So look forward to that in February, late February rather. Jason?
My bomb is to Blizzard for being cool.
Really?
Yes, for being cool, because by now you're probably aware or you've heard of the whole controversy regarding King, the company that makes Candy Crush Saga.
Yes.
How they've copyrighted the word Saga, and now they're going after the guys who make the banner Saga because it's infringing on their copyright and because they don't want people to use the word Saga in their games. There is a little tiny bit of legal, reasoning behind it, the sort of thing where they could potentially win this kind of thing, and it makes just the tiniest bit of sense. But the point is that you don't have to protect your copyright this way if you don't want to, if you aren't really concerned about other games competing with you. Or let's put it, I guess that's the way to put it, is if you think you have a good enough game and you're not that worried about other games making
piggybacking.
Piggybacking. Whereas you look at Blizzard. Now, what if 10 years ago they decided, well, we're going to copyright World of Warcraft? How many, and well, obviously they copyrighted it, but I mean, if they decided they were going to aggressively pursue other games in the same fashion.
They had the name World?
How many MMOs? Yeah, how many MMOs have had what about World of Tanks or World of Cars? World of Cars Online is another thing that Disney
World
made.
of Planes, World of Warplanes.
World of Warplanes, yeah. Or anything with craft. How about Crimecraft? I think there's been some other, craft games too. It's like they could have taken that same approach and gone after all of those guys, but instead they just make their game and they make it as good as they can. And yeah, they know that other people are going to do that, and there's going to be at least the tiniest bit of confusion. There's probably like 3 people out there who think World of Tanks is made by the same people who make World of Warcraft. But whatever, The other thing is that, even if World of Tanks is, and it is really good, it's made a lot of money and has a lot of people. It's not because people think it's related to World of Warcraft. And they realize that. And of course, you look at this case, of course, the Banner Saga is so far removed from Candy Crush Saga that it's not even remotely close, as opposed to at least World of Tanks, World of Warcraft.
Well, I wouldn't even consider the word saga. I wouldn't even consider the word saga to be like a part. It was just like a descriptor. It's not even part of the name. It's a descriptor that is added to the name. It's like copyrighting the word the, like the blah blah blah. It's just sort of something that helps define the overall, I guess, tone of the game name. Essentially, Banner Saga, the Banner Saga, Candy Crush Saga. We get it. It's a saga.
Although I really think Square Enix should come up and try to sue King for, hey, remember we made this game called Saga Frontier a while ago.
I know.
You guys shouldn't be using that then.
Yeah, they should totally. Oh my gosh. Yeah, so definitely egg on Candy Crush.
Bad for them, good for a company like Blizzard to not have been dicks, basically.
Yeah, just good for a lot of developers like that aren't dicks,
Yeah.
Just bad for Candy Crush, just bags of dicks.
Yeah, I wouldn't say as often, but if you're playing Candy Crush on the web, just stop.
Yeah,
it's just don't.
You heard it from Jason. They're bags of dicks.
Bags of dicks. Bags of candy dicks.
All I can think about now is that gif with a woman and then the hot dogs hitting her face. That's all I can think.
You spend more time on the internet than you probably should.
It's kind of old, so I mean, eventually I think everybody would have seen that, but apparently not. Well,
apparently I haven't.
Yeah, now you got to go see it. Now you have to go look up the woman getting hit in the face with tons of hot dogs. All right, now we're gonna go ahead and move on to the question of last week. We had no member bombs. It looks like people were taking some siestas, not letting us know what they thought was horrible or the best. But we did have someone mention something about the question of the week, which last week it was pretty specific, and I can understand if people Didn't know exactly, or were too scared to put something in there. But it was, what do you think the future of free-to-play will look like in 5 years? I don't think people will know what their lives will look like in 5 years, let alone free-to-play games.
I don't know what my life is going to look like in like 5 weeks.
Well, 5 weeks.
I can't plan that far ahead.
Man, I think that you need to like restructure your life if you can't plan that far ahead.
That could be true, but anyway.
All right, well, we got one from Toll Shorty here. He says, in 2019, in the year 2000, I expect the gaming to be on Oculus Rift, or it's yet to be seen competitors, meaning that he expects it to be a pretty common thing to be done. I really think games will head in that direction. I agree. And then it says, as far as payment models go, he gets into that. He says, I think there will be a system like Netflix by then, where you pay X amount of dollars a month to access X amount of titles. I think the pay-to-play, buy-to-play, free-to-play system will be all but phased out by then. I think microtransactions in some forms will still exist, but will be diminished by today's comparisons. Consoles do something very similar already, and it seems quite popular. Well, there is something like that. It's called GameFly.
True, but that's more for like I guess what you call consoles, like full games.
I would say something like gaming in the cloud, basically. The
cloud
it's sort of gaming.
No, go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say cloud gaming seems to be more maybe what he's thinking of, because if you think of like PlayStation, Sony just announced that they were going to do PlayStation Now, which allows you to stream PS3 games and maybe eventually PS1 and PS2 games to the PS4, like through emulation. So I could definitely see that being a system whereby all future games could be distributed, not just through physical, but in addition to physical media as well. What were you saying, though?
See, I think, again, it's sort of like what we already have with what SOE is going to do now with their new $15 a month pass to play all their games. I think the big companies that have a lot of games can do that. I could see this sort of thing being done maybe for smaller companies, like banding together, either forming the network or having there be some overarching company like GameFly or whatever that makes deals with a bunch of different free-to-play companies to allow them to sort of merge their currency into one pool. You can then play on all of them, something like that. So you take I don't know, I'm trying to think of a small free-to-play game.
Well, Loadout, for example.
Loadout. That's a good example. Yeah, you have Loadout and then 3 or 4 other games, or
like
5
Warframe, Loadout. There's varying games. Although Warframe, I think maybe at this point is too big. But right. Yes, I could definitely see you have them band together, and then you say pay $20, and then you have access of $20 worth of currency in all games instead of paying them separately.
Yeah, for companies that aren't big enough to have like their own networks, like Sony or something like that, to have their own full things on their own. I don't think it would be like an all. I think there still will be individual games. I think there will still be companies like Sony that just do it with their games, like maybe Turbine could because they have DDO and Lotro and Asheron's Call and whatever else they might add in. Maybe they'll make a central currency. But yeah, I could see there being a little bit more of that.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I definitely agree in the sense that Oculus Rift is going to be big. I think that we're going to start seeing MMOs in the next 5 to 10 years come out where virtual reality headsets are going to be required, because you're going to have to actually hear me out on this. I think can you imagine you're in a mech MMO. You sit inside a mech, right? And you fly around in this mech, and to actually flip some of the switches in this mech MMO, you have to look at the switch. And then, your character flips it, essentially. He'll look at it, and you can click, and then you flip it, or you hit a button, and he'll flip it. So it actually requires you not only to just maneuver with your keyboard and mouse, but to look around in your cockpit as if a real pilot would do in order to flip various switches and to control the machine. I mean, there's definitely a lot of extra mechanics, extra immersion mechanics that can be introduced through things like the Oculus Rift. And why are you so apprehensive about that?
I don't know if it was my first Gen Con or my second, one of those, somewhere around there. So back 1993, 94, whatever, there was some little virtual reality game where I put on a helmet and I looked around. And it wasn't obviously on par with the Oculus Rift.
That was 20 years ago, I would hope.
Yeah,
not.
Exactly. But I know, and it was very simple, Pong-like graphics. And that's what I've been hearing about. That's what I heard about back then. I was like, oh, virtual reality. And there are movies, sci-fi movies with virtual reality. Obviously, you have your holodeck on Star Trek being the epitome of it. People have just always been talking about that for, like I said, for 20 years. And I just think, unless you have something of the fidelity of, again, I'm not saying the holodeck, but something a lot more advanced, I think, than even the Oculus Rift. I just don't think it'll replace or be like a huge thing. I think I put it on par almost like with the Wii, Nintendo Wii, or all the other motion control stuff, which is popular and it is pretty big. It's not that it's a total niche or anything, but it hasn't replaced PC gaming. It hasn't replaced control pads on your consoles or whatever. I think there will be more, but I don't think it's going to be in 5 years. I don't think it's going to be that ubiquitous.
It could very well. I do know that there's a lot of developers putting their support behind it, which may have not been the case in 1994.
Yeah.
But I would hope that it at least gets integrated to the point where it is a common peripheral. To the point where not everybody gets it, but it's kind of like buying a steering wheel. If you're really into racing MMOs or you're really into flying, you're going to be buying a steering wheel or a joystick.
Sure.
If you're really into a particular type of game, you're really going to want an Oculus Rift because the game is best experienced that way, essentially. I think that's the way the Oculus Rift will go, but having watched like .hack, I just can't help but fantasize about the time where I can just plug everything in and feel like I'm in a world and see my character's hands moving in front of me and having control over that. I mean, full body simulation or full body control through like things like the Oculus Rift and virtual reality.
It sounds great until they hack into your brain and make you want to kill a spree once you're out.
Then it becomes like surrogates and you just die when you're in the game. You can die in real life. Like,
unfortunately, no one can be told exactly what the Oculus Rift is.
Oh, no one can be told. It's right now it looks like it's a gaming device, but in the future it's revealed that it actually is there to control humans.
Well, I'm taking the green pill.
Oh, okay, the green pill. Now the question of the week this week then is going to be, outside of questing, what other areas do you think MMORPGs need to improve upon the most? So questing is sort of like the given. A lot of people say questing needs to be changed. Kill this, collect that. That's sort of something that we've seen as an issue in MMOs for a while. But I've seen recently in discussions that people just feel like MMOs in general are on the decline. They're not as sort of like the hip thing like they were 5 years ago. And I would have to agree with that. There certainly, I think, is a stigmatism attached to MMOs now that a lot of people are burnt out on them, that they provide the same thing, or that they're too similar to each other, and they're just not that innovative or that new. EverQuest Next, EverQuest Landmark withstanding, we haven't seen those fully, so we don't know. But I was curious just what you guys think are other key areas MMORPGs could improve upon outside of questing. We have action-based combat. What are some areas that you guys think, in your opinion, MMOs could really benefit from, focusing on improving? So that's the question for next week. And Jason, I'll let you stew on that as well. I don't know. Stir, stew, think, whatever.
I'll stir my stew.
Simmer. Yeah.
Simmer.
You just think about that, and we can get back to that next week, talk about that as a group, and find out what your thoughts on that were. But otherwise, guys, that's going to go ahead and finish up our episode today. 97. Remember, just 3 away. 98, 99, 100. Had to count in my hand just to make sure. 3, yes. 3 away from the big 100. So be sure to check that episode out. Until then, we always have ways for you to communicate with us. You can catch me on Twitter at Spunkify, if I occasionally tweet on there. You can also email me, michael@MMOBomb.com. And sometimes I stream twitch.tv/MMOBomb. Who knows? I may even stream some EverQuest Next Landmark Wednesday.
Ooh.
I don't even know if this will come out by then. It may be too late for that. But I'll be streaming some stuff, definitely. We'll have some fun. We're going to invite more people into the stream. Check it out. I know one of these days I'm going to stream some Loadout as well. So there's things to look forward to, guys, definitely. Jason, how do people get a hold of you?
They can find me on the Twitter at WinterInformal. They can watch me stream at twitch.tv/JasonWinter. I've been playing a lot of Hearthstone lately. That's still got me.
How are you doing? Are you doing good?
I did pretty good. I streamed last night, Saturday. Won 4 wins in an arena. Started another arena, went 1-2, and decided to just call it quits for the moment. So I haven't resumed that yet. So far, I've won 3 and 1 4 in the 2 arenas I've been in. So I've been at least okay. And also occasionally I will blog at gosh.
He just blogs on the internet.
I blog somewhere, yes, at jasonwinter.wordpress.com. WordPress. I forgot what it was.
Winter is coming in April.
Oh, please stop that. I'm tired. I hear that so much now with the Game of Thrones stuff coming out. Ugh.
April. I can't help it, Jason. April. At least you're not obsessed with Game of Thrones, how Game of Thrones is obsessed with male genitalia. That is really, really prevalent in that show, I have to say.
So are the boobs.
So are the boobs. But male genitalia, I don't know. It's pretty much 1-to-1 in my opinion, almost.
Equal opportunity. There you go.
Equal opportunity. There we go. Gotta have the male genitalia. Speaking of male genitalia, you should play Loadout. There's tons of that in there. There's quite a lot. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Go play Loadout if you want to see male genitalia. Otherwise, we'll see you for the next episode here of the Free Play Podcast. Until next time, Spunkify Jason. Later. Spunkify out.